Well, good afternoon, good morning. Hello, friends. Welcome to Investment Immigration Conversations. I'm your host, Carolyn Lee, principal and founder of Carolyn Lee PLLC, a U.S. investment immigration law firm dedicated to helping clients build their futures with investment immigration. And boy, I couldn't be more pleased to say I'm tickled orange to have my dear friend Adam Greene from PeachTree Group with me today. Hey, Adam.
Hey there, Carolyn. Thanks for having me. Carolyn and I have known each other for years and worked together on a lot of industry issues, on negotiating drafts of legislation. So it's really a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you. If I could just describe Peachtree Group, we are a
I was just going to ask you to.
Oh,
Yes,
thank you. See, we,
moment.
we, we do think alike. Peachtree Group, I'm just so thrilled to be working for and representing Peachtree Group in EB-5. We are a private equity real estate firm out of Atlanta, Georgia, thus the Peachtree. We have done more than $12 billion of transactions, currently have about $6 billion under management. Peachtree is really focused on investing in dislocated financial markets. So we have
Mm.
provided billions of dollars of debt, nearly a billion already this year, for various flavors of real estate and some other assets. And a couple years ago, the Peachtree folks called me up and asked if I would come over and bring EB-5 to as one of the tools that Peachtree uses. And I'm just so thrilled to be there because Peachtree knows how to underwrite and execute and administer deals, and bringing this tool to Peachtree is great, not only for Peachtree, but also provides just a great outlet and option for EB-5 investors.
Oh my gosh, that's a fantastic intro. And I actually did not know that dislocated communities, was that the term you used?
Dislocated markets, financial markets. So there,
Dislocated markets. Yeah.
yeah. And that's where we live today. The markets for bank debt are really banks are under stress and also pulling back. What has happened in the real estate markets with cap rates has sort of really eaten out at some value and equity, and so Peachtree is here to fill the gap in those dislocated financial markets.
Wow. Love that. Love that. And of course, all of that is recipe for a very vibrant EB-5 market.
For sure. Actually, great transition. Yes.
Yes. So, well, Adam, today we are gathered to talk about the one big, beautiful bill act, OBA.
Oh,
So,
ba, ba, ba.
yeah,
Yeah.
OBA. So, let's just, I mean, what are your thoughts generally? I mean, let's just kind of start there and then we'll see where
So,
that goes.
so I think all of us in the industry, when the bill was coming out, were watching very closely to see how it would have addressed, in the first instance, EB-5 specifically. Secondly, maybe the gold card, and then more broadly, immigration generally. And I think we can say that it sort of left open questions, but happily did not hurt EB-5. In the first instance on EB-5, the bill is silent. It does not address EB-5 at all. And that doesn't mean it overlooked anything or anyone was remiss. In that case, and in my view, EB-5 has a law that is in effect through 2027. So there was not a need to address EB-5 in the law in this one big, beautiful bill. So then the question was the gold card, which was topical. And of course, President Trump announced that, and Secretary Lutnick has been advocating for that since February. And that was something we were watching carefully because it was possible that the gold card was in some way going to be inserted into one big, beautiful bill. And there were various reasons, and there's a lot of articles written out there. There are various reasons why it would have been tough because this was technically a reconciliation bill, so you can't really change policy. But the gold card was introduced with the goal of reducing the debt actually. So it was possible that it was going to be in there, and so we were all watching. Although we didn't think it necessarily would have been in order. Had they introduced it, there were questions about whether they would attempt to change the EB-5 law in favor of Gold Card, and we think that that was difficult. So happily, the gold card was not addressed, certainly not to the detriment of EB-5, nor was it really addressed at all in the beautiful bill. So then the last thing I mentioned was immigration generally, and there is stuff in immigration in the law, mostly having to do with funding and enforcement. And this is something we've heard from various people in various circles, and it's not a political judgment. I should preface at all, if there's no political judgment here. It doesn't really matter what your political views are. What is true is um, people, and now in the majority in Congress and in the White House, um, believed, as I've heard, that um, there was a need to get back to focusing on enforcement of existing immigration laws. So this is not a judgment on what laws are good or bad, but there was a an emphasis on wanting to enforce laws. And in the big beautiful bill, there's certainly a lot more funding for enforcement, and that's really what we saw there. But no changes in immigration categories, and certainly not EB-5. And I think that was well, I view that as a positive.
Yeah, I think that's that all of that. Thank you so much. Um, it is a very big bill. There's a lot in there. And we're sort of like hunting, is there something in there that relates to what we do? And there isn't anything in there that directly affects EB-5 immigration. So I think that's not what this bill is about. To your point, it's yeah.
Yeah, there's so one of the things that Peachtree does as we raise equity is we sponsor projects that are certainly EB-5 eligible, but separately we sponsor projects that benefit from the Opportunity Zone tax program.
Mhm.
And one of the things that is tangential but interesting for
Mhm.
EB-5 is that the Opportunity Zone program has now been made permanent. And I view that at best, or hopefully, a beacon of hope. But
Yeah.
certainly at worst, it's good news for us
Yeah.
because
Well,
now they don't have to focus on whether or not that's expanded.
yeah, I really commend folks to find a good summary of the bill. There's a lot in there. I mean, we're very focused appropriately on our universe, our slice of it, but there is a lot in there, and there's some that provisions in there, like the opportunity zones, that are quite interesting and very helpful overall. So. I commend folks to look at, for example, the summary, a section by section summary of the One Big Beautiful Bill, published by the House Committee on Ways and Means. If you Google it, you'll pick it up. It's like a 48 page, 47 page summary, and it was revealing to look at even that summary. So I commend folks to check that out. But so back to what we know. We've got EB-5. We're not directly in there, but surely there is just a heightened sense of worry and concern about this heightened enforcement uh, backdrop. And it's just we're just getting that the sense that that is what the emphasis is on, is not relenting. So that is it. It's and we've got F1 visa revocations, although that's been reversed. So how are you experiencing? And I'll just say that from our standpoint, we're experiencing it in fielding a lot of questions and worry and anxiety from both clients and their families, because so many of EB-5 investors today are F1 students. So how are you experiencing the current climate?
Yeah, we're getting more calls for sure, and people are finding us for sure uh, with questions, and of course, at the risk of being way less sophisticated than you, of course, could explain, Carolyn. But EB-5 is an immigrant visa; it's a green card, and that is distinguished from an F1 or an H1B or many other visas that allow people to stay in the country but not permanently. And what we're seeing with this enhanced enforcement and some of these sort of ways of vetting or questioning people who are here on non-immigrant visas is maybe it's not as secure or durable as it once was thought. And the stories are out there in the press. So that I think does advocate for EB-5. I think it does make sense for those people who are in school or foreigners working for U.S. companies to consider, of course. And I appreciate that this is self-serving, but it also happens to be true that it's EB-5. If you are able to execute on EB-5, it ultimately provides a green card, which is much less frivolous than other non-immigrant visa
You know,
categories.
what's interesting is I think that 100%, I think that's correct. So if you are here in the US and you have children in the US, you are like, hip deep in our nation. You are going to look for ways to make your residency permanent because waiting a century in the EB2 backlog, for example, is just really not, that's not a great
Right.
prospect.
Yeah.
And that's another webinar. But I'm finding also that the questions though are being asked like, do we want to do this? We were considering this, but now do we want to do this? And the sense of, is this are we welcome? Is this the right thing for us? Maybe we should go to Canada. Those sorts of sentiments are also part of the mix. Do you find that too, Adam?
Um, I haven't. I've heard some of those questions starting to come through, although I hear the questions really asked rhetorically, I have to say. And
Make sense?
I would tell you that my sense, and I actually, if you don't mind me sort of turning the tables, I'll ask you what you've heard, even though this is
Please.
you're the host here. But my sense is those questions, of course, have to be asked now because we live in a world of images, and there have been some images that are alarming. I will say that I have heard some of the stories that make it out now onto the internet are things that were happening before. You hear about people being detained for secondary as they enter the border. That did happen before, although again, as I said, people are looking for enhanced enforcement. So I would think it's probably a safe bet that it's happening more. Um,
Well,
but
well, I was just going to say to your point, it's just generally more difficult to sift through what's what's real and what are the images, and really then it kind of gets into the other existential questions of what is but I mean, tabling that, yet
yeah,
another thing to address on another webinar.
yeah,
But so like it's just difficult to sift through and find reliable information, right?
right. And so then you come to, you know, how do you evaluate this? And I'm not a lawyer, but let's stipulate that it's
Although your
it's
dad
mo
wishes you
my
were.
dad wishes I were. Thank you for remembering. But let's stipulate that it's there is a heightened enforcement or this environment again where the country is looking at or a big part of the country is looking to have more enforcement. And we can talk separately about humanitarian concerns and all of those things. And as you know, I have a lot of sympathy for those causes. But separate from that, does all of the noise, even if there is noise and some of it's true, does that make people less interested in settling in the United States. The example you used a minute ago are the people with kids who are U.S. citizens who are here and they're hip deep. There I would say, you know, you probably got to stay. But what I'm hearing while people are worried about enforcement, I am not hearing yet. We don't think the United States of America is a good bet. We're not
Yeah.
interested in coming to the U.S. And at the risk of being corny and overly patriotic, things move in pendulums, and I do think that we still are an attractive place to go and settle.
Well, 1000%, I agree with you. Um, and but I also think too, I mean, because when you think a lot about this stuff, inevitably it gets very abstract and philosophical. And I love that. And so, but you know what you know what it gets to is like we are now competing, right? We're competing with Canada. We're competing with the UK. We're competing with New Zealand, with Australia. We're competing with other parts of the world that want wealth and talent, right? At that level.
For sure.
And
For
so
sure.
we're really kind of in the cauldron here, I think, as a nation and having to ask ourselves, what, what do we want and how do we get there?
So I agree 100%. And of course I do. And where I stand on all of these things. Um,
I
but
don't
aside,
actually.
oh,
Do tell us.
so for sure, you want to have the best talent from around the world wanting to come here and feeling like they have opportunity here, for sure. And for sure, there's a risk if people feel like there's more enforcement. Does more enforcement mean unfair enforcement? Is there a risk to me coming here? Am I going to be welcome? For sure, that's a question. Um, Bringing it back to EB-5, I would tell you, um, again, there's a lot of people who are interested in EB-5. I've heard a couple of questions from people saying, "Do I want to come here?" But you know, EB-5 itself, just what the program does and how it's distinguished from a lot of the other investment immigration programs around the world is this is a program that is um, about economic development and in creating jobs. It is not as commonly thought of a program to just buy a green card. And there again, I think that's one of the great things about how the U.S. Exercises
Yeah.
capitalism. A lot of government programs, new market tax credits, opportunity zones, low income tax credits, all of these government programs are do a similar thing to EB-5, which is we use our laws to incentivize economic development. And we let the free market use the framework that we set up. And so EB-5 is just another example of this that I think is
I
terrific.
I couldn't agree with you more. And here's where I'm just like, like gonna do a little like, I don't know,
Rah,
just
rah.
something, because when you read the legislative history of the program from like 88, 89, that's really where the spirit of the program comes through. They wanted, it's like language like, we want this investment to be at risk. We want, in the sense that we want the investors to have their skin in this game have a stake in the success of this venture. And I think that is very, very that's very Americana.
For sure it is. And what's actually interesting, as you see, you can look, I've been seeing interesting voices writing about the gold card in EB-5, and you can go out on the internet, and it's not some of who you would expect. And some of the voices talking about it are saying, okay, gold card, we understand. And hey, if you could really pay down the debt, great. But to the extent you look at having potentially the gold card, let it work with EB-5. And it is a very different flavor, certainly a different price point or investment point. And in the gold card, you don't get your money back. And in EB-5, you hopefully do. The, um, the concept of creating jobs and having economic development is just a different animal than what the gold card is
Completely.
trying to accomplish. And so it's encouraging to see people actually really embracing both.
Yeah, totally, totally. Well, let's pivot to the RIA, the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act of 2022. And Adam, you and I were like actually in the drafting room.
We were in the trenches together.
We were there, my friend. Like sleeves rolled up, sharpened pencils, right? That was
And and it was a privilege to watch your mind work while that happened.
right back at you,
Mm.
friend. Seriously, I honestly. And if it were about spreadsheets, forget it. We would be, yeah, like we're having a lot of fun. So the RIA, beloved, imperfect, but really awesome in so many ways, revived the program, created new cues,
Mhm.
opened up the program, brought integrity. We can go on and on and on and on, but it sunsets
Mm.
in 2027. So what should we be doing here? Just like what? We've got 2 years.
Yeah, so we have 2 years, but we have to start working now. And of course, there's the grandfathering provision that sunsets in
Even
September.
earlier.
You're right, in
Yeah.
September 26th. So that means that that will happen if not addressed during this Congress, during the Congress that is sitting right now. So it's not it's never too early to start advocating for this. And personally, I believe, and I'm just sort of digesting this concept about the Opportunity Zone program being made permanent. I think that's a great model. Listen, they tested the Opportunity
Mhm.
Zone program for 7 years, technically December of 17, so little more than 7 years. And then they made it permanent because there was a feeling, while imperfect, that it it accomplished a lot. I would say after 35 years of EB-5, really 32 of the regional center program, I think we've proved our worth. And again, imperfect, but getting better. Um, I think the time now is it's the right time to start saying this works. This does what it's supposed to do, and it is constrained. Its impact is constrained only by a what I would say is an artificial limitation on the number of green cards that can be issued each year with the derivatives issue, and just overall by the limit. So I think now is the time, and the way to accomplish that in going back to Schoolhouse Rock is by speaking directly with our congressmen and senators.
I'm just a bill, Adam. And I'm
on,
sitting
on
here on
Capitol Hill.
Capitol Hill.
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, so I mean, you nailed it, right? I mean, let's just hover for a moment on those important advocacy points. It's about making the program permanent. I've just become almost an evangelist on this, Adam, honestly, because that is just fundamental. We need the program permanent so that we can have that stability. And so we're not planning for how are we going to close all of this in the next 2 years, but we're thinking more long term
Totally
and
agree.
thereby avoiding those incredible peaks and nadirs and those things that just create a lot of unnecessary chaos. Would you
I,
say?
I totally agree, and I I would say, to be absurd, I think that's one leg of a two-legged stool. If that a two-legged lean-to, it has to be permanent. People have to feel comfortable, and that's why I think the grandfathering was a terrific addition to the bill. And I know a lot of other groups advocated for that, and congratulations to them. I think that was terrific. Um, But it's not just the permanence of the program, but the other thing, of course, that's important is the capacity of the program. And as you just mentioned, it was it EB 2 or 3 that has a 100-year wait list. Um, this is so terribly important, not just for those of us who work in the industry and want to promote the economic development, and this is our livelihood, but it's just so important for the people who are investing and trying to pursue their green card. This question of how long I have to wait, the lack of visibility, and then the waiting lines growing are something that we really need to address. And here again, I would say I know the Opportunity Zone program, the new law, made tweaks. It increased the amount you could put in. That's not a capital gain. It did some other things. It relaxed some requirements on improving property in
Mhm.
rural zones. There are ways, there are meaningful ways to make EB-5 even more effective, and it can grow if we advocate for some of these things now. And I think that that is, in addition to making it permanent, we need to make it, we need to allow it to be as effective as it can
Adam,
because
what are some of those ideas that you have? I can just tell you've got some specific ones.
well, um, here you will, as always, outplay me here.
All
The
right, let's just
obvious,
establish that as a given.
right? The
Let's
obvious one.
just,
It's true.
that's
It is.
done.
It is.
All
Yeah.
right.
Certainly not counting derivatives against the visa limit, but then you get into, is there a way to increase capacity above those 10,000-ish visas per year? And
Which is
there's precedent.
7% of the worldwide limit of employment-based visas. 7%, folks.
Correct, correct. But there's precedent. The Afghan Allies Act, which allowed, which I think is under some threat right now, but those green cards were offered to deserving immigrants outside of the preference quota limits. So those were EB4s, but they didn't count against the EB4 7.1%. So I think there's a lot, and a lot of people in the industry have done work on this, but I think we can redouble our efforts in looking at other creative ways, and we can show Congress and the administration how you can get there with a lot of creative ways. But it fundamentally starts with saying, look what we've done, and look at the potential for this program to help, as Peachtree does in our little way in dislocated markets. This economy is living in a dislocated market. The financial markets are trying to reset themselves in a higher interest rate environment. We're trying to figure out how to finance everything, our economy, and EB-5
I
can help.
kind of feel like I'm asking the right person here. So, I mean, let's just like think for a moment on that. It's a little off script, but dislocated communities. How would we imagine bringing EB-5 capital to dislocated communities without bringing undue risk? Or is that just a part of it that
So
is
I,
inextricable?
so so um, so a good example is a deal that I can talk about because it's done. We're not seeking to raise money, but we did a deal in Utah, and we provided EB-5. Although Peachtree, as we do, we committed to the loan, and then so there was certainty for the EB-5 investors and for the developer. But we committed to a deal in rural Utah, and there's some very big deals. But where we play is in the sort of the middle market. So when you're looking at a 15 to $30 million deal, that deal cannot be done by a local bank, a savings bank in a rural market. They
Right.
don't have the legal lending limit. And yet that deal is too small for a national bank. This is not their business model. So that used to be the purview of regional banks, um, some of these banks that don't cover the whole United States, but um, they are unable to invest in real estate that looks like that. And
Right. Too much risk.
Right. So it's not even too much risk.
Okay.
It has to do with not being able to invest in real estate and the size of real estate on their books and other things.
Okay. More
And
technical.
actually, that's important because it is technical, and that's really important because these deals are not necessarily bad deals. They just are deals that live in dislocated financial markets. That project
Right.
is a worthy project that doesn't necessarily have more risk. In fact, I'm very happy to speak about it offline. It's a great low risk deal in my view, but these deals are not necessarily riskier. They just don't have access to capital, and
Got
that is
it.
where EB-5 absolutely can play. There's another technical thing, and a bunch of these things are probably too detailed. As you know, I can never give a short answer, but the EB-5 makes sense because so often the way EB-5 is funded, you wouldn't get into a great financial crisis where there's a debt deflation spiral because these deals stand on their own.
Hmm.
Each deal, by definition, because you have to talk about a specific deal and job creation there, they stand on their own. And while I think, of course, our deals are relatively low risk, if there is risk in a deal or someone else's deal, it doesn't bring down the whole economy. So EB-5 is the right tool to help
Hmm.
communities that are not that maybe don't have access to capital, but
Yeah.
there are worthy
Well,
projects.
Adam, you're not the first one. You're not the first one to have spoken about EB-5 capital in these terms. Another client recently has spoken so eloquently about, the developer, fantastic credit risk, no shortage of money or availability, but it's EB-5 plays a strategic role in the capital stack. It's flexible. And so it can be, it's just more fleet on its feet and the way in which it can be deployed. So, and that it resonates exactly with how you're describing it. So good stuff. Good
Carolyn,
stuff
it's
and worth making permanent
worth making
for the
permanent
good
for
of
sure.
our economy.
For sure. We need it now as much as ever.
Amen,
Yeah.
Adam.
Thank you, Carolyn. This is fun. Thank you.
Isn't it? I told you it would
Yeah,
be.
I just get to talk, and as you know, I love to.
Well, it's about picking the right topic. When we get you in that, and then you're good. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us today with my dear friend Dada, and we'll see you next month for our next conversation. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
Carolyn.
Adam.
Bye bye.